Hello there YouTube, and hello there to all the people who have found this video who don't usually watch this channel, because I suspect there's going to be a fair few of you. Largely because this title is a little bit clickbaity. Are video games dying? Is gaming dying? This is a topic that keeps showing up in my feed. That's because I watch a fair few gaming channels. Especially recently, I've been watching a lot more gaming. So, this topic keeps showing up. Why is it? And the reason it's showing up is because all the 20-somethings, the current generation, are losing their mind when it comes to gaming. They've all suddenly hit that age where they've stopped playing video games for a year or two, and they believe that the entire industry is collapsing. Their own nostalgia is hitting them hard in the face, and they seem to think that it's unique to them. I'm going to let you all in on a little secret now, and I'm going to say this straight away. You're not special. Now, I've seen this on a few different channels. Exiled is one great example. Exiled's a channel I've been watching for a while. He makes some good videos, good gaming videos. He makes a couple of other videos as well. And his channel was around the same size as mine, maybe a little bit bigger. He had similar subscriber numbers, similar view numbers, a few hundred views per video. Then he made a video, Is Gaming Dying? And it exploded. It got tens of thousands of views, and it's still by far his most successful video. It's getting thousands of views every day, and he's getting many subscribers off the back of that one video. It is getting a lot of views primarily because it's using gameplay footage, which is what these gamers expect. They expect to see gameplay footage, which is why this video won't do anywhere near as well, because people will click on this video, expect to see gameplay footage, see my face, and will immediately click off. So this video will not do anywhere close to as well. I could put gameplay footage on and trick the algorithm into getting a load of gamer kids that are not going to watch the rest of my content to click on it, but then I'm just going to end up with a bunch of views from kids that don't care about the actual content I'm going to make watching one video, and that's not going to really help. Now the fact is, it doesn't matter whether or not the games you play look like this, or if the games you play look like this. It's all the same thing. We had the same thing when we were kids. I am very quickly approaching 40. And trust me when I say, you 20-somethings, you're not special. Gaming is not dying just because you've suddenly discovered adulthood. Gaming wasn't dying when we discovered adulthood either, and it didn't even die back during the crash of '83 either. It didn't die. Gaming wasn't dying. Gaming was very much in its infancy back then, and a few companies did die off. That was largely industry crap that was happening, but gaming was going perfectly strong in Japan and Europe during that time. It was an American-only phenomenon, and it was affecting only a few companies. The microcomputer craze in Europe was going just as strong, and gaming in Japan was completely unaffected. So the video game crash of 1983 that was saved by Nintendo, and video games wouldn't be around if it wasn't for Nintendo and Mario. Yeah, that's not true. It's just a load of nonsense. It's a very America-centric view. That aside, these kids that are playing video games and are wondering whether or not video games are dying. What are they focusing on? They're focusing on the fact that video games have got more and more commercial. They've got more and more money grubbing, and this has happened. There has been a downturn, and I'm not going to completely denigrate what they're saying, because there is a little grain of truth to it. Gaming has started to downturn a little. The last couple of years there has been a big drop-off. Gambling has become the big problem in video games. The thing is, the industry, whilst it is suffering at the moment because there's a lot of greed, there's a lot of social justice crap, there is more being produced now than there ever was. These kids will go back to old old years to the greatest games lists, and they'll look back at the late 90s and the early 2000s, and they'll say, look at the greatest games lists, look at years like 2001 or 1997, and look at these years, and look at all these great games, and they love doing this, and they'll point to games like Super Mario 64, which is shite. It's not a good game. I don't know why people think it is. Yes, it revolutionised 3D movement in some respects, but that was going to be done anyway. There were other games doing the same thing. Super Mario got there first, sort of, but it wasn't really that revolutionary. We had other games doing similar things, like Croc and Tomb Raider games. We had the Crash Bandicoot games, which were also 3D platformers around the same time. These games were doing just fine. If Super Mario didn't come along and do it, someone else would have done it anyway. So it's not that big of a step. People like to claim that these games are the greatest games of all time, and they're really not. If you look at what these games did and compare them to what games are doing now, the games of today are infinitely better. People will go back and look with rose-tinted glasses at the old games. Now, there are fantastic games, sometimes games that haven't been surpassed. I still claim that there are very few racing games that have managed to get the arcade racing quality of Burnout 3 Takedown and perfect that for a modern system. There are a few that come close, but I still claim that Burnout 3 Takedown on the original Xbox and the PlayStation 2 is one of the best racing experiences that you can find. It does not exist on a modern system, and there's nothing quite like it. The Need for Speed games came close on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, then they went open world. There's nothing again beyond that. There's Need for Speed Hot Pursuit, which recently got remastered. That was remastered for PlayStation 4, so now you can play the remastered version, which is not too bad. That's again the closest we've really got to an old-style arcadey racing game. That's all we've really got, though. That's one genre, one example. But people look at all these different games and they claim that gaming 10 years ago, when they were teenagers, was fantastic. There were all these really, really great games. And then they'll list off games and I go, really? Those games? Those were the great games? Are you sure they weren't just games that you played as a kid and therefore you have a lot of nostalgia for? Because they'll talk about games like Halo and Call of Duty 4, and I'm like, okay, I didn't care for it. I'm not a first-person shooter fan. And they act as if the things that they played really, really mattered. The fact is, what you're missing is not gaming. It's your youth. It's your teen years. You're being nostalgic, and frankly, you're already way too young to be nostalgic. You're still in your 20s. Stop pining after your teen years and enjoy your 20s before they're gone. Because before you know what's going on, they'll be gone. And then before you know what's going on, your 30s will be gone as well. I'm still living in my 30s, and I'm enjoying my 30s while I still can, because before I know, I'm going to blink and miss them, and I'll be in my 40s. So I'm going to try and enjoy my 30s while I still can. There's great games out there. And yes, indie games do count. And people will laugh and joke about how, indie games don't really matter. But the indie games of today are just as complex, just as big, just as wide-reaching as the mid-range games of 5 years ago and the mainstream AAA games of 15 years ago. If you played a game on PlayStation 2 that you really like, I guarantee there is an indie game today that is just as well built, just as detailed as any game you could find on the PlayStation 2. So, if that's the kind of thing you remember playing as a kid, I guarantee you can find that in the indie scene. There are more games being produced now than ever before. So no, gaming isn't dying. What I will say is that there are problems with the games industry. There are big issues. The games industry is overrun with greed. That it is overrun with big industry conglomerate problems where games industry, where the games industry pushes for all the money instead of just money. A lot of games industry companies are focused on making constant growth and constant profits to the detriment of their own company. They're not interested in just making sustainable profits, which they could do if they just carried on making decent art. They're not artists, they're business people, and they want constant growth. They want to just keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It's a problem with capitalism all over. Now, with that system, what you end up with is a company that eats itself, because it will actively sabotage its own systems in order to make short-term gains, even if it will destroy the company long-term. And that happens time and time again. We see it over and over. This is a problem within the games industry, but it's a problem within every industry. It's something that happens regardless. And we do need to try to push against this. We do want to try to keep as many independent companies as we can independent, where possible. I'm not sure how we achieve this, but if we can, let's try to push for it. If we don't support microtransactions, don't support loot boxes, rally against gambling and gaming, and all the other anti-consumer practices, the DRM systems, things like de novo, if we don't support these things, then they won't be used. And the problem is people will support them anyway. And if you keep buying these games, they're going to keep putting shit like this in these games. The other big problem, of course, is that games companies are being heavily politicised. This is a problem with all media. Media is always going to be the centre focus of the culture war, and this is something that people don't want to talk about. It's something that people don't want to really think about. This is a perfect example of this. Horizon Forbidden West, really, really good game. Great sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn. Horizon Zero Dawn is the better game though, because whilst this has more updated systems, better combat, it runs better, it's got better graphics, the insidious inclusion of woke politics in this game, and it's subtle. It's not overbearing as it is in some games, but the insidious inclusion in this game ruins a lot of the story points. It makes a lot of the gameplay elements feel like that they are there just for forced diversity points. A lot of the storylines, they have niggling elements where you can tell that they've only put certain things in just so they've got an excuse to have as many different multicoloured people as possible. Like the skin colours range dramatically for no reason other than to make as many different multiracial people as possible. They've gone out of their way to highlight as many different non-straight people as they can in the game. Like it's something close to about half the population are either gay or bi, and openly so, and actively talking about it. That is a very, very high percentage, given that the percentage of people in the real world who are non-straight is somewhere in the region of 7 to 9%. That includes bisexual people, by the way, some of which live heterosexually. So, yeah, this is something that does somewhat ruin the game. And that is a problem, and it is a more modern problem. You only need to look at photos of some of the games companies out there, and you can see just what it's like when gaming is a very male-focused hobby. It appeals to men way more than women, and yet all these game companies are staffed almost exclusively with women. The women outnumber the men now 2 to 1 in so many of these game companies, and it's all because of diversity hire. It is a desperate attempt to pack these companies full of feminists, and it's human resources departments and diversity departments. There's 3 or 4 men in the back that do all the fucking work, and about 10 women at the front who just make diversity reports and shit like that, who do no real fucking work. They just come in, drink the coffee, make a report on how diverse the company is, and then get paid a ridiculous amount of fucking money for doing that job. You should see some of the videos that I've seen on the culture in Silicon Valley for tech companies. The sheer amount of non-work that the vast majority of people who work at these companies do is ridiculous. So when people go on about crunch in video game companies, be aware that yes, game developers do crunch, and they do have to push to get all this work done. But that is also largely because a good like 1/3 of the game company's staff are just there as hang-ons. They're diversity hires that don't actually do any goddamn work. If they fired a lot of the HR department and only hired programmers and designers, writers and artists, and actually hired people who build the goddamn game instead of people to constantly write diversity reports, the game would be out 3 months early. So that's a problem in the games industry. There are definite problems in the games industry. Other problems, of course, is that these people aren't appealing to gamers. They're appealing to people outside of the games industry completely. Any old sod, really. But these people don't buy games, which is why they're constantly pushing for easy modes and trying to make the games appeal to as wide a group as possible. It's why they got so pissed off when Elden Ring just pissed all over their cornflakes. Because this game, whilst it's a damn good game, ruins the experience by having Aloy walk into every single puzzle, every single ruin, and immediately blab her mouth and tell you the solution to every puzzle as soon as she walks in. That's not fun. Elden Ring doesn't tell you a damn thing. Now, there's a nice medium, there's a nice middle ground where you can get enough of a hint that you feel like you're being directed without being told the solution, and not just left to fend for yourself in this hostile world. You can have a directed experience. A lot of games used to do that. Now they're holding your hand the entire way, or they're doing the FromSoft thing of just dropping you in the world and letting you die 50 times until you figure out how the hell you can do anything. But there needs to be a happy middle ground, I think. But that is a big problem, is a lot of these people are non-gamers, which means they don't actually know what appeals to gamers. It's why they get so angry when something like Elden Ring does well, because they don't understand what it was that appealed to gamers. It's why you'll see a lot of games in the next 2 or 3 years that are just going to be copying FromSoft. FromSoft is the one company that is doing well at the moment, so they're all going to jump on and they're all going to copy it. Open world games are going to be much more hands-off. Combat games are going to all focus on Soulsy style combat, and it's going to be glorious, because what we're going to end up with is way more skill-focused gameplay. We're going to end up with more hands-off, more exploration-based open worlds, and I think we're going to end up with a second renaissance of gaming, of modern gaming. This is going to be a good step, I think. I think that new game developers are going to take the groundwork that From Software have put into their games, and they're going to do a good job with it. So, given that, gaming can't possibly be dying, can it? So that answers the question. What really these videos represent, these videos that we're seeing in our news feeds when people are searching this, is a lot of people in their 20s who have grown up, they've moved out, they've started at university, they've got their first job, they realise they don't have any free time anymore, and especially teenagers that have just entered into the workforce or just started university, who have just spent the last 2 years in COVID school, because they spent the last 2 years of their education doing school, working from home, doing piss poor schoolwork. So they've had a half education where they studied from home. They didn't really have to go to school. They got away with basically being handed a diploma from school without actually really having to earn it, because they did all their assignments from home when they could be arsed. They didn't really have to go to lessons. They didn't really leave the house. So they're used to having oodles of free time. They're used to being very much in their own home. Now they've got to go out into the workplace, they've got to earn a living, they've got to go to lectures, they've got to do all these things that real adults have to do, and they're not used to it. They're not used to having no free time. They're not used to having real responsibilities. So when they come back, they're getting this feeling of guilt when they play games, because they realise they've got way more important things they should be doing with their time. And they have this feeling of apprehension when they switch a game on, because they realise that their time is not really their own anymore. So they don't feel a sense of achievement anymore. The game feels frivolous. The game feels like it's wasting their time away, and it's stealing away the time they should be spending on other things. Additionally as well, a lot of them are spent, like I say, 2 years from COVID, locked away, playing video games and watching TV. They've completed Netflix 3 times over, and they finally discovered what other people look like in 3 dimensions. So a lot of them are going out and getting laid and discovering what it's like to go to a bar for the first time. They're finally getting a chance to be out there in the real world, and when you can do that, you don't want to sit at home and stare at a screen. You've been doing that for 2 years. You've been forced to do that for the last 2 years. So you can go out and be with people. You can play sports again. You can be outside. You can travel. That's one of the reasons why gaming feels like it's dying. Additionally, gaming has suffered for the last 2 years because of the very same COVID. Schedules have been delayed. The new game systems are not really off the ground yet. PlayStation 5 and the new Xbox have been out for 2 years, and yet we're still seeing every game being a cross-gen release. It's only with 2023 that we're seeing a substantial amount of PlayStation 5 exclusives coming out. At the moment, the PlayStation 5 exclusives are Returnal, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. Are we counting Demon's Souls because it's a remake? I mean, you could play the PS3 version. If we're counting that, that's 3. I can't think of any others. That's it. I think of ones that are coming out, like Forspoken. But everything else is cross-platform. Even the big games, like Horizon Forbidden West. This came out on PlayStation 4. Elden Ring came out on PlayStation 4. I have friends who still play on PlayStation 4. They didn't bother to upgrade, largely because they couldn't bloody find one. And they played all the same games I did. They played Horizon, they played Elden Ring. They didn't feel the need to upgrade because nothing came out on the PlayStation 5 that they felt the need to get. The only games that were on PlayStation 5 were Returnal, which I still haven't played, Ratchet & Clank, which I got the Platinum for within the first month, the Astrobot packing game, which again I got the Platinum the first week. And once I played those 2 games, there was nothing for me to play. Like, I already had Demon's Souls on PlayStation 3, so I could have just played that if I really wanted to. I've still got my PlayStation 3. So really, would I have been buying an entire system to play one remake and one procedurally generated 3D, one procedurally generated third-person shooter? Because that's all that was available. That's it. Just those 2. There's a lot more coming next year. There's a lot more, and a lot of them are third-person action games with Souls-style combat. Some of them are open-world Souls-style combat. There are a lot of really good remakes and remasters on PlayStation 5. The Neo Collection, for example, looks fantastic on PlayStation 5, plays like a dream, but you can still play it on PlayStation 4. Same with Jedi Fallen Order and Control Ultimate Edition. They look and play beautifully on PlayStation 5, but they're all available on PlayStation 4. So there is a big feeling that gaming feels like it's stagnating over the last 2 years. So is it dying because there doesn't really feel like anything new is coming out? The last 2 years, there hasn't been any real push, any real big releases, anything that smacks down, with the exception, of course, of Elden Ring. Horizon was a pretty big release, but it came out within weeks of Elden Ring and got completely demolished by it, which is a shame because Horizon deserved a bit better. It was a far better game than people realised. But the Horizon franchise has had that all along. Like Horizon Forbidden West came out within weeks of Elden Ring, but Horizon Zero Dawn had the same problem. It came out within weeks of Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which was the inferior game. Breath of the Wild is not a great game. It's a passable open world at best, with substandard Zelda dungeons. That was a Wii U game that was ported over to the Switch, and then everyone bought the Switch as if it was magic. For no good reason. It's like, if you really wanted this game, why didn't you buy a Wii U? Like, you knew that it was coming to the Wii U. If you wanted this game, you'd have bought a Wii U already because you'd have been waiting for this game. No, you all bought a Switch and acted like this was a sudden brand new experience. Now, I never understand Nintendo gamers. The Switch, even to this day, still has almost nothing exclusive on it. Nothing really of great value. Most of the games on the Switch are just Wii U games remastered for the Switch, and PlayStation 4 games that run not particularly great. Like the only real value for it is that you can play these games now on while you're sitting on the toilet or on the bus. That's the only real value there. There are a couple of good Nintendo games that were on the Wii U that have moved over, like Super Mario 3D World and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. Some really great games, but again, I'd rather play them on the Wii U because the Wii U has a D-pad and the Switch doesn't. So I'm not going to be playing a platformer like Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze on the Switch, am I? Just stupid. So, anyway, I've got sidetracked with talk of the Switch. Is gaming dying? No, of course not. It's had a bumpy couple of years, and it's had a bumpy couple of years because of COVID and now this bloody stupid war between Russia and Ukraine. It's causing financial crises across the world. It's causing chip shortages across the world. These international issues are going to cause gaming to stumble and stagnate for a while. And we know this is going to happen. But it's not actually causing problems in gaming as a medium. It's causing problems in the industry. But industry-wide problems are happening regardless. Gaming itself as a hobby is fine. And it's going to stay fine. There are plenty of games coming out, and if anything, 2023 and 2024 look like they're going to have some of the best games coming for a good long while. I suspect 2023 is likely to be one of the best games, one of the best years in gaming. It looks like it's going to have some truly outstanding games, and it's almost certainly going to see a resurgence of Elden Ring players because it's going to have the Elden Ring DLC as well. And then a lot of games very similar to Elden Ring or coming from the Elden Ring hype. There's going to be a lot of similar open world and action games. So that's going to see a big boost. I suspect that if you like that kind of game, you're going to be in your element. I do, so I'm quite happy. But also there's a lot of RPGs, there's a lot of big JRPGs coming out. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, there's plenty of stuff there. Like a lot of the people talking about gaming dying, they're very mainstream gamers. They're playing mainstream AAA, they're playing mainstream shooters, they're playing open world games. I didn't see a single person talking about JRPGs. Now if you play JRPGs and you're complaining that there haven't been great games, then you clearly are not paying attention. Because things like Tales of Arise and Persona 5 are just proof that gaming is moving forwards in that area. The quality of the recent JRPGs has just been moving up and up and up. So there's no room to complain there. Every year new JRPGs seem to be coming out and they just get better and better and better reviews. Strategy games have been expanding and developing in ways that I never thought I'd see, with console gamers getting a surprising amount of access to strategy games. Games that you never would have expected, like Civilization and Stellaris, are now available on PlayStation. So that's a real turn-up. There's a lot of racing games now available on PlayStation. PlayStation 4 in the last couple of years got a lot more racing games. So that's a nice turn-up. There is a downturn in a few other areas. Couch co-op has all but disappeared, which is a huge, huge shame. But that doesn't mean that it's gone completely. There are a few games where couch co-op does exist. A good example is this one, Streets of Rage 4. Great couch co-op game. They do exist. They're just few and far between. But as people who remember playing couch co-op get older and get into the game industry, they're going to start making more games, and couch co-op is going to start to have a revival. So expect to see more and more couch co-op games show up. And hell, I know this is going to sound stupid and silly, but couch co-op gaming was a thing done because it was too expensive to do the alternative. And the alternative is something that I've done. And people will scoff at the idea but yes, you can do this. The price of a console back in the day, back when we were playing on 16-bit hardware, when games were on cartridges, the price of hardware and the price of games was significantly higher for a hell of a lot less. And most of the games weren't couch co-op then either. When you play these games, unless you're playing something like a fighting game where you're going to be playing on one screen, generally speaking, you don't want to be sharing a screen anyway. You want your own screen. So why not have multiple screens? Set up more than one television, set up more than one console. You could quite easily, buy 2 consoles, 2 televisions, and just run the game twice. I know it sounds expensive and excessive, but if you're going to run multiplayer, that's the best way to do it. I actually do this myself. Yes, I have multiple televisions and multiple consoles. I have a PlayStation 5 and a PlayStation 4 in my living room. I have 2 screens, and I will run multiple copies of the same game at the same time in order to play multiplayer. I will literally sit there with a friend, and I will play on the PlayStation 5 while they play on the PlayStation 4, so we can both play on the Division at the same time in the same room. There's no reason not to do that. Why would I throw away my PlayStation 4 when I got my PlayStation 5? Hell, I had more than one PlayStation 4. So I could legitimately have one in different rooms. One in the bedroom, one in the living room. Which means that I could easily set up effectively a party of PlayStations and have multiple different PlayStations all set up with different people logged in. The only problem with that is you're going to need a different copy of the game per person. And that's where problems lie. Now, this will get expensive. And people are going to go, this is way too extreme. And yeah, I can see that being a problem. So, what I would say is simple. Don't assume that you need to go so high-end. It's much easier to set up a couple of smaller televisions rather than going huge. Get a couple of smaller screens or a couple of computer monitors and go last gen. Go with PlayStation 4s and play those games. You can get a couple of PlayStation 4s now relatively cheap and play those consoles multiplayer by having a screen each. Set up a couple of screens next to each other and play together that way. It is just as good as playing couch co-op, if not better. It gives you much more in the way of options. I think that this is the way to play multiplayer, and honestly, if you actually work out the price, it works out to be no more expensive than couch co-op was back in the day. Because couch co-op was expensive when we were playing back in the 90s. Couch co-op was not commonplace. There weren't that many games that did it. A lot of it was pass the controller to second player, take turns kind of a deal. The only games that were really multiplayer in that regard were the beat-em-ups and the fighting games. Some of the racing games had split screen. You had the occasional couch co-op shooter, like first-person shooters, and a lot of those were the PlayStation 2 Xbox era. And it was just a few of the shooters. The Halo was a big one that had a lot of the couch co-op. The N64 had a lot of couch co-op with things like GoldenEye and Mario Kart, that kind of thing. And of course, you had your party games with Guitar Hero and Rock Band and all of those. The Wii Sports games, but just multiple consoles. That's the way I do it. Hell, you don't even necessarily need to buy different consoles. These consoles are eminently portable at this point. You can fit one in a backpack comfortably. I've told someone before, you know what, I've got a second TV. Bring your console and your controller with you. We can plug it in. We can set it up. We can play PlayStation for a few hours. And they've done it. And it's one of those things, it takes a little bit of coaxing to get someone to do it. But once you get it set up, it only takes a few minutes to unplug a console and plug it back in. Once they've got it all set up, they actually realise, you know what, this is worth doing. And you have a lot of fun. So yeah, that's my advice if you're missing the couch co-op experience. But no, gaming's not dying. Gaming is absolutely fine. There are loads and loads of games out there, and the gaming experience is not just going to disappear. There are problems with the games industry. I'm not going to say there aren't any problems, but the games industry is running strong, and there are plenty of games out there to play. You just need to accept that sometimes things change, and most of the people that are claiming that gaming is dying, are just kids who have finally hit their 20s and have realised that they don't have all the free time in the world. Sorry, that's just life. Anyway, I'll see you guys next time, and we can talk about something else. Till then, bye.